People no longer bound by their non-disclosure agreements. What can you now disclose? My best friend worked at a roadside attraction near Chattanooga. TN. Called Ruby Falls. There's something else called Ruby Falls elsewhere in the country. It's supposedly a waterfall inside a cave. Of course. The trail to the cave is redone with all sorts of rock brought in from around the world. I think they've owned up to that part now. But the waterfall itself is barely a trickle naturally. And then only in the wetter season. They've run a pipe up there to supplement the falls. Hidden by cracks and crevices and cemented over. And powered by a pump off to the side. Which you can't hear when the water is splashing down from 100 feet overhead. It's 99% from the city of Chattanooga, or maybe Lookout Mountain, municipal water supply. Of course. With such a wet area. Old electrical wires going back to the Great Depression. And 300 feet underground. It sputters. Or shorts out and stops every now and then. The first rule in the falls room is make everybody leave immediately if the power goes out. Not for safety. But because the fable agreed upon will be shown as fake. The book you're reading might only be a bestseller because the author had enough money to buy thousands and thousands of copies. Have them shipped to a warehouse for storage. And eventually destroyed. The secret ingredient in Jimmy John's tuna salad is Kikkoman soy sauce. I worked at a small bakery in New York City when I was younger. Every morning the bakery would take their day-old cupcakes and deliver them to a tour company that did Sex and the City tours. The tour company would pass our cupcakes off as cupcakes from Magnolia. And significantly much more popular bakery. When I was fired from Auntie Anne's in 2010, I signed a 10-year non-compete NDA contract, promising not to detail the baking secrets or work for another pretzel establishment. Well, that ended this year, so now I can run out and start a pretzel store because the secret I was keeping was making pretzels literally requires 2 products. One of them being water and the other a large bag of pretzel meal dust powder. Quite literally anyone with $2,500 can start a pretzel stand and make perfectly fine pretzels. It's not difficult whatsoever. Edit. I signed a letter when I was hired, but I got a copy with my termination letter. I used to work for a large gas station chain. I worked at its warehouse where it creates a lot of the donuts. The room was really hot, so we were always sweating. There's some machines where the donuts get glazed in chocolate. They're these small machines, they look almost like a BBQ grill. They always wanted us to be super fast glazing the donuts. Working in a hot room and working at super fast speeds, it was natural for a lot of people's sweat to just drip in the chocolate underneath us. Never eat the chocolate donuts from a gas station. McDonald's made me sign a NDA regarding a robbery that took place during a graveyard shift. They made me take a freaking polygraph test because they thought my ex and I were involved due to the simple fact that I had stopped by that day to pick up some documents. I was a manager. I had business to do. Frick you. McMiller. You know NDAs are only good if you have the money to sue? Worked with a company that didn't pay me. So I told them their NDA didn't apply. They threatened to sue. My response: you can't even afford to pay me. You sure as hell can't afford to sue. I was a contractor for NASA. I still fully support the agency. But I was extremely bugged when I learned that each separate NASA center, e.g., JPL, Kennedy, Ames, Goddard, hides many of its inventions and breakthroughs from the other centers so that when HQ is ready to assign a big mission, and a lot of dollars, to one center, they have a better chance to compete over the others. Look what we invented. Ames can't do this over there. Give us the next moon orbiter. The downside is that there is a ton of reinvention and duplicated efforts going on. Sometimes years of work go down the drain when another center does the same thing faster. My perspective was, you all work for NASA. Share knowledge. Collaborate. I was frequently ordered to turn down anything revealing when speaking to other centers. I'm still bound, but insider trading is real and executive often step down or retire early for getting caught. This is something I could spend a lot of time diving into. But the subprime lending company I used to work for as a software engineer spent a lot of time and effort manipulating the UX of our various applications to encourage customers to accept loan terms that were not necessarily in their best interest. I quit pretty quickly after realizing that the people in charge had very little interest in actually supporting us in making a product that would be better for our customers. I once had to sign an NDA to get a price on a printer for my sign shop. This was a printer that was only sold by one distributor, by the way. So there wasn't even any direct competition on this particular model. I think their gimmick was that if they make a really big deal out of giving you the super secret pricing, that you'd be lulled into thinking it was really something special. Edit. Interesting comment by ubeardstashman below, who probably has the right idea as to what was going on with this practice. Never had an NDA on this, but if I'd give too much info, I'll get tagged and likely get in serious trouble. BCBS had a severe security breach back in 2007. If you were with them in a certain area of the country and ever called them the number for help on your account, all of your personal info was caught by a third party. Every caller, every piece of data. They never disclosed this breach. Edit. Clarification. I disclosed to a minority partner that the majority partner owed him $100K. He could have easily received a check for that amount, but he sued for $700K. Spent $300K on a lawyer and got nothing. I was once an ed contractor for a now defunct bureau within the Department of the Interior during the event Deepwater Horizon disaster. Since the department has its hands in offshore drilling, they were part of the response team and boots on the ground. Anyway, it's a little known fact that all the extra stress plus aging it equipment during the first 48 hours after the blowout took their entire authentication and email infrastructure down, Active Directory and AMP Exchange, for 2 days. There were also other weird glitches from offices around the US. Not related to the outage. A switch going out here, building automation there. It was a freaking disaster. This was, of course, after years of emails and documentation stating they were heading that way. I was directly involved with recovering that infrastructure in the aftermath of dissolving the bureau, which really wasn't anything special. They just became 3 different bureaus, got new email addresses, and continued on in their role under a new title. Edit. Words in detail. We reused buffet-style food served in a cafeteria that we're supposed to compost and record as waste. The health inspector says anything that's left open buffet-style and serve yourself can't be taken back and repurposed because it's not monitored and could be cross-contaminated or many other things. Nobody should ever eat buffet-style if avoidable, for your information. But the Fortune 500 company I worked for was unhappy about the money they were losing by composting the food, so they make us keep it and reserve it later. Or repurpose it into soup or casserole or something. Personally, I never did this and just waited for my boss to leave and compost the food, but others I worked with were too worried about losing their jobs to go against orders. I didn't want to be fired but felt morally obligated to not feed people food that was meant to be garbage. So I just sneaky tossed it out when nobody was looking because I got paid really well there. We all had to sign NDAs saying we wouldn't tell the media or non-employees about recipes and procedures that covered leftover food and food waste. Eventually my boss discovered what I was doing and I stood up to him about not being willing to reuse garbage as food, so we agreed that I'd just quit, because while they could force me not to talk about it, they couldn't actually force me to do something illegal for my job, and I was clearly refusing to do it. University I used to teach at did not care what prospective students got for entry into the university. In multiple meetings I attended, they treated students as headcounts towards better course statistics, and if a single student was underperforming in a single semester, instead of removing them they would give them just above the threshold to stay on. This happens across a lot of universities. Final grading decisions were not down to me but course directors and head lecturers. I had raised it multiple times to an anonymous hotline at the university, but nothing was ever done. The owner of the company is an absolute psycho. They have been trying to hire developers for years now, and despite paying really well, they can't keep them. I quit after 3 days. I was trying to help out on a high priority bug on my 3rd day, when I said all the requests to X endpoint are failing, to which he replied, I see 1 out of 500 requests succeeding. Does that sound like all to you? Dart. He then called a company-wide all-hands meeting and proceeded to tell everyone how important it is that we all speak carefully, and that we don't need fricking retards like me lying to the company making it harder to diagnose issues. I told him to go frick himself and quit on the spot. Turns out the company has a big history of this. My boss, who had been there for 2 weeks, had tried to quit the week prior, but was convinced to stay on to meet me. He left a few days after me. Apparently a few people got together and tried to tell the owner that he needs to watch how he talks to people, and he blew up on them about it too. I later heard that I was something like the 10th person to quit within their first month in a row. The sad truth is that the dude actually seems pretty smart, but has been acting like a megalomaniac while he pisses his money away and abuses his employees that are for whatever reason unwilling to leave. I worked at a gym, and in the showers there was yellow shampoo and blue body wash in pump dispensers. I found out that the only difference between the two soaps was the color. Edit, memory jog, as it was 25 plus years ago. Hand soap was blue. Body wash was green. Shampoo was yellow. All the same. Edit 2, as funny as the replies are, it wasn't an NDA about soap. It was just a generic employment NDA to protect the privacy of members and business affairs of the gym. I used to work in fine dining in Oklahoma City. Cocaine. Cocaine everywhere. I've personally walked in on several NBA players over the years. Face down in that white girl. Come to mention it, I've seen several of them fricking other guests on the same bathroom counter that their teammates just did a line off of. Personally got to watch Harold Hamm sign his divorce check. $975 million is a whole lot of zeros in a small space. Wild times indeed. Edit, for those that may want more stories. I did get to see LeBron covered in toilet paper. Hilarity ensued. Needless to say, she was escorted out. I had to sign an NDA to work at this tech company, and I'm still waiting to accidentally overhear something cool so I can feel special for knowing something important but being legally barred from disclosing it. I used to work for a construction company in rural Texas, and man, we did so much shady poop. Honestly, my boss was like the Joe Exotic of construction. Always calling us the N-word, cussing us out, threatening to fight us. None of our haul trucks could pass a state inspection because he was too cheap to fix them up. He never paid his taxes on any of the track hose. Anytime the tax man would show up, we would have to drive all the equipment deep into the woods to hide it. He always paid the OSHA inspector off because he knew our shops couldn't pass inspection. We had mountains of scrap metal in the woods. Mountains of old oil buckets stacked in the woods. We had an old rail car in the back that was full of oil hydraulic transmission fluid. The cap was off, so when it rained it overflowed and would just drain into the earth. I can't count how many times we would get some equipment in and he would tell us to dump the fluid into one of the ponds. We always had guys up there trying to sell drugs and poop. Telling you, my 3 years there was wild. Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA will have microtransactions. The NDA was signed in 2016. I was getting more and more worried as the release date kept getting closer, and then it happened. The backlash was so strong that EA went down in the history books as most downvoted comment in Reddit's history. I think I'm finally ready to let the world know my secret. If you've ever used VeriSite, the loading spinners you see when the report loads aren't waiting for anything. People kept complaining that reports were coming back too fast. So it must not be working right. It doesn't take long to complete a few hundred Google searches simultaneously. So the loading spinner just makes you wait a few seconds longer so it feels like more is happening. So glad to finally get that off my chest. Bonus fact, edit, I also added applying phlebotinum, reticulating splines, and looking for cat memes as random loading messages. But they wouldn't let me do harassing at Ted Cruz on Twitter. I was wrongfully terminated by a past employer. They lowballed the settlement offer and withheld payment on my accrued vacation. This part was actually illegal. It took about a year to get to the point where their attorneys realized that we were not lying about them holding back the accrued vacation, and this caused them to make a more than generous offer to make my claim against them go away.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.